What's up, mi gente? Lennon Lee por aquí. Bienvenidos a otro episodio de Se Habla Real Estate Show. Por aquí me encuentro nuevamente en cuarentena con mi pana Arturo Borges, que me acompaña, y con otro pana, Matt Picheny, que también nos acompaña desde Boston. Un par de buenos amigos míos y, bueno, me emociona tener a Matt en el podcast. Así que, bueno, nada, Arturo, cuéntamelo todo. ¿Cómo vas tú?
Yo excelente, mucho trabajo, muchas cosas en agenda, pero el día de hoy tenemos en nuestra agenda un episodio en inglés, otro más con Matt Picheny. Matt es originario de Orlando, Florida, es fundador y socio de MJP Property Group, una compañía de inversión inmobiliaria con un portafolio de más de 2,000 unidades residenciales. Matt tiene más de 14 años de experiencia en análisis de propiedades, financiamiento, adquisiciones, construcción y operaciones. Él también es un marketer veterano que ha producido proyectos galardonados para clientes de Fortune 500, incluyendo a Verizon, IBM y Coca-Cola. Matt, it's my pleasure to have you on the show, man. How are you?
Thanks, Arturo. It's a pleasure to be on here. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
We're doing fantastic. Thanks for being with us today. And Matt, I want to start out with your marketing and advertising background. You know, being a marketing veteran, like I just said in Spanish, I don't know if you got that. In which way and how have you effectively applied those skills, that know-how and creativity into your commercial real estate career? Maybe it's in the capital raising side, the operations, the value-add business plans. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, sure. I understood. I can get about every third word or so from my Spanish classes in high school, and also I lived in Miami for a couple of years. That's where I first met Lennon. So I can understand a little bit, but I'm not so good at speaking it, unfortunately. My marketing background, I'm able to leverage a lot of what I did in the marketing world in real estate in sort of two ways. Okay, so the first is, my actual function in the marketing world, I did that in New York for about, a little over, right around 20 years I was doing that. My function was actually as a project manager. So it's a little bit of a long story, but I initially was coding, was a programmer, right, doing the programming languages, and then got more involved and became a manager and a project manager. So I would oversee teams doing the work. And so I would be overseeing, the finances on something, on how something was done, along with the creatives, interfacing with the client, and just kind of doing everything. And I worked my way through the ranks of that and ended up overseeing, larger teams, and then eventually started overseeing multiple project managers who were working on different projects on their own. And I, was sort of the department head. So that allowed me to develop a very good skill set, learning how to get projects done on time, on budget, and at the highest quality possible. That is, those skills are things that are directly transferable into the real estate work that I'm doing, sort of on the day-to-day aspects of the business as an asset manager, where now instead of overseeing project managers, I'm actually overseeing property management companies, because we hire third-party property management companies. And I'm speaking with them, interfacing with them at a minimum of once a week, many times, in many cases, much more than that, and overseeing them and managing them and driving them to accomplish what our goals are as the owners of those properties. And then there's also the marketing aspect, right? So sort of through being involved in the marketing business, almost through sort of osmosis, just from being surrounded by it, almost like the way that my Spanish proficiency increased by being in Miami for a couple of years, being in the marketing world for almost 20 years, working on these campaigns, I learned marketing techniques, strategies, and the marketing vernacular, and was able to start, really understanding how to do that and how to execute that. And I'm able to now take that and apply that to the marketing of our properties. I really understand the digital space, digital marketing on Facebook and Instagram and just basically on the internet at large. I understand that extremely well, and I'm able to, in some cases, actually, execute that or direct teams to execute that, so that we can drive traffic to our properties and market them once we've done our value add to let people know, hey, we've revitalized this property. Come check it out with fresh eyes, and hopefully lease it up.
That makes a lot of sense, man. Well, I guess now that we're there, what are some of those maybe specific strategies that you're implementing at your properties that you've seen work best for you in terms of actually producing or bringing more traffic to your property? Maybe one or two that come to mind.
Well, the thing that I was surprised about at first was the impact that we've been able to make on Facebook through interacting with people. I mean, it shouldn't have been a surprise to me, I guess. And it was something that I wanted to try because I've seen it be impactful in other markets with different products and services. But I didn't know if that would actually translate into people actually coming in to rent an apartment. And surprisingly, or maybe not so surprisingly, it actually has been extremely effective for us. Whether we're putting some paid media behind that or just interfacing with the just on the Facebook platform, we've had tremendous success.
Is that like the Facebook Marketplace?
See, we haven't been doing too much on Marketplace. We did experiment with that, and we didn't find a heck of a lot of traction on Marketplace. But just through doing posts and posting with a reasonable rhythm and cadence, nothing crazy, and talking about the different things that we have going on at the different properties, we've been able to generate interest, which has been really wonderful. And then interacting with people, them reaching out to us through Messenger, answering their questions, and then actually inviting them to come on over to the property and see it in person.
Yeah, let's go back a little bit and take a minute to better understand your story and how you actually transition from being programming and coding into commercial real estate. I'd love to get a little bit more insight on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, it really goes all the way back to when I was a little kid. My father was involved in real estate as a residential real estate broker. And at one point, him and his partner, his business partner and him bought a house. I don't even know the circumstances of it. I just remember that as a very young child, I remember my dad had a house, and it was for a very short period of time, maybe a year, I want to say. I was confused at the time as to why he had a house if we already had the house that we lived in. And he explained to me, well, you can have a house and rent it, and those people pay you money for it. So at a younger age, I just kind of understood like the basic concept of, owning rental property. But that was really it. Now, fast forward many years later, I'm living in New York City, working my way up the corporate ladder, putting money into 401k, which was going into the stocks and bonds, which was fine. But I also, being that I was a web programmer at the time, I was able to do some other, well, I called it moonlighting back then. Nowadays, everyone calls it a side hustle, right? So I was able to do some projects here and there, and put together a little chunk of cash, not a lot, but a little something. And I didn't want to put it in the stock market just because I had all my 401k there. I wanted to do something a little different with it. And I ended up buying a piece of land up in Connecticut, and then ended up building a house there and renting out the house. That could be a whole other podcast episode on its own, but the short version of it is I ended up having a rental. It was originally going to be a vacation house. It ended up being a rental house, and really sort of cut my teeth on it from that perspective. And then over the next 10 years or so, I got more and more involved doing some single family, did some fix and flips, started buying some single family homes, some turnkey properties, things of that nature. And then right at that time when I moved down to Miami, shortly before I actually met Lennon, I started getting involved in the multifamily space because I was looking, I had been doing this, growing it slowly over, like I said, a period of about 10 years, and said, with the transition, was a good time for me to at least take a break. And at the time, I was like, we'll see what happens. Now it's definitely, I have bid farewell to, but at the time, I just wanted to see if I could make a go of it, doing real estate full time. And doing that on the single family side of things, while it's possible, and there's a lot of people who do it, it didn't seem for me scalable in the way that I wanted to grow a business. And I wanted to go ahead and get involved in the multifamily aspects. So having sort of cut my teeth on sort of the mechanics of doing smaller properties up to, one and I had some duplexes, and then going ahead and scaling up to much larger. Sure, from a financial perspective, it was a lot more, but a lot of the mechanics are similar. I went ahead and I had a lot of experience with large multi-million-dollar projects, overseeing those, in the advertising world. So there was a lot of synergy, a lot of things that I felt I could, use. And then I also joined, one of these mentor programs, which I would recommend for anyone who's looking at becoming active in the space. You can definitely go further, faster, and really collapse timelines. So I joined one of those groups and learned a lot and made a lot of connections and kind of went from there.
I think that's a perfect, we could do a perfect segue here to understand then. You mentioned that the mechanics in the single family investments and the multifamily large apartment complexes space have a lot of similar things. But then I guess there are also things that are different, and we can touch on that a little bit later. But first of all, then why don't we, I guess, go deeper into why multifamily made more sense? You mentioned something about being able to scale faster, but just talk to us a little bit, I guess, the overall perspective that you had that made you make that decision and leave the single family investment space and go into commercial multifamily.
Yeah, sure. And so just to touch really quickly, something good that you're pointing out, Len, going from the single family to the multifamily, I think overall, like if you're looking at broad strokes or an outline, right, it's very similar to multifamily. But when you get into the nitty gritty, when you get into the details, they're very different, right? Financing on a single family, you're usually doing like a 30-year fixed, and that's pretty much it, maybe a 15-year. And that's almost all that you can do, where there's in commercial, first off, you can almost never find something that's a 30-year fixed, but there's many different ways that you can go about it. So financing is a component that's the same, but very different. But talking about why multifamily, for me, it was really about being able to scale that business. Even when I was involved in the single family, I wanted to go bigger and do larger things. But I thought that I would need to, have some, rich relative that I didn't know about, die and leave me millions of dollars, or how else would I be able to, do it? And that's when I learned eventually I learned about syndication and being able to work together with other investors and us all pool. Oh, so syndication is where a bunch of investors and people who have varying levels of experience, people who've never done it before to people who've done millions of deals, will all put their money and their resources together to try to achieve a common goal. And so, you can achieve things that you wouldn't be able to do on your own, right? So the first syndication that I did, we acquired a $10 million property of 132 units. Now, if I had tried to do that on my own, beyond just not having the capital, which was, I needed around a little over $2.5 million in capital to actually do the acquisition and have money to do rehabilitation that we were doing on the property, I wouldn't have been able to qualify for the loan, and I had no experience doing it. And there was a lot of reasons why I couldn't do it on my own. But what I did was I got together with another person who has experience who's done, at the time he had done about 10 of these deals. And I partnered with him, and we got 3 other people who have larger balance sheets than us, so that with the 5 of us together, we had a balance sheet that made our lender feel really comfortable with lending us the money to do it. And then we brought in another 35, I think, an additional 35 people. 30, it would actually be 36. Sorry, I was just doing the math in my head. Another 36 investors to come in, again, as a sort of passive investor in the deal. We all pooled our money and our resources together, and we're able to buy that. So that's what a syndication is. And syndications don't have to just be done on real estate. There's people doing all different kinds of syndicates. My wife's involved in theater, and sometimes her and I will get together and we'll do a syndication on raising capital for a Broadway show. So a syndication can be in any sort of facet of business where people are working together. But the most important thing about a syndication is you need to hire an attorney, and preferably an SEC attorney, at least an attorney who understands those SEC guidelines and rules and regulations, to make sure that what you're doing is legal, because you can't just go around and grab millions of dollars from people without having known them in specific ways, and having vetted them, and having disclosed certain things to them. So you need to make sure that you're complying with all the federal guide and state guidelines.
Matt, in line with what you just said, I mean, this 10 million, 132 unit deal, why don't we do a little case study, go a little deeper on it, how you approach the investment, where you raise the capital, how do you find these equity investors? And then I'd like to even go deeper into the financing, how you obtain that financing, what do banks look for in the borrower, let's just dig deep into that.
Sure. So, well, let's talk about the financing components, since that's fresh on my mind. That was the last thing you mentioned. So from a financing component, I like to go for long-term debt. You can buy properties on I see people buying properties on anywhere from 1 to 5 years. I think 3 years is very common, where people will go in and get a bridge loan and, lock up their debt for 3 years. And then in 3 years, they're going to figure out what's going on. I mean, the idea a lot of times in a situation like that is that you're going to go in, you're going to raise the rents, do these improvements. In 3 years, your asset's going to be valued a lot more. So you're going to do some sort of cash out refinance. And look, there's many different ways to skin the cat, and I don't disparage anybody. There's a lot of people doing it that way, just like there's a lot of people doing single family that are very successful and making a lot of money. The way that I choose to approach that is I like getting longer term debt. I like getting usually 12 years, sometimes 10 years, but usually 12 years of debt. And what that does is it puts me in a position, for example, let's say I have bought a property, like the $10 million that property that I bought a little over 2 years ago now. I bought that property. Had I bought it on 3 years of debt, I'd probably be sweating bullets right now, because, right now, at the end of April 2020, we are in the midst of a coronavirus crisis in the United States. And, I don't know where we're going to be 6 months from now to a year from now. And that's really when I need to, if I only have 3 years of debt, I would need to sort of figure something out. Where on that property, I got 12 years of debt. I'll have 9 more years to go. In that 3, after 3 years, I'll still have another, 8 years to go. No, 9 years. Sorry, 12 years of debt. So we'll have more time. We have a much longer runway where I've got fixed rate and I don't need to worry about it. So that's why I like to go for that kind of debt, and I like to go for agency debt. So that's usually provided by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And that debt is non-recourse, which I also like. So I'm able to go after those kinds of deals and feel very comfortable that my debt service is going to remain constant. And in order to qualify for that debt, Fannie specifically looks for, and these terms can change, and it can be different for different people depending on, there are different permutations to this, but in generally speaking, they like to give these loans to people who've already had these loans before. So when you've never had one of these loans before, it makes it rather difficult. Now, I was able to bring in my partner, Justin, on this deal, and he had already done, like I said, about 10 of these deals before. So he was already known by Fannie, and they already knew Justin as an operator and an owner who had done this, who had some clout and some credibility to him. So we were able to get that loan. In addition to that, I had signed on as a key principal on another deal. So I had actually signed on as a sort of like as a guarantor on a previous deal that someone else had done. That was 168 units. And it's a non-recourse deal, which means they can't go after me personally if something goes wrong with the deal, as long as there was nothing illegal done. Now, if there was any sort of embezzlement done, cooking of the books, lying on applications, things of that nature that were done by me or any of the other people who signed on the loan, that makes that loan all of a sudden fully recourse, and they can come after me and my personal assets. So, you don't want to just be a KP for someone you don't know, but I KP'd with a group of people that I knew and felt very comfortable with. So therefore, I sort of already had, a sort of a known quantity to Fannie, plus I had a partner. So that allowed us to sort of meet, I think, those qualifications. The additional two qualifications that Fannie is looking for, they want someone, they want to see that group, meaning the people who are running the deal, the sponsors, and also any key principals. This is one of the reasons why a sponsor might want to bring a key principal on, is to bolster their balance sheet, because Fannie Mae wants to see a net worth equal to the loan amount. So that loan on that $10 million property was over $8 million. And my net worth and my partner's net worth, we were a little shy, not much, but we were a little shy of that $8 million mark. So we brought on some people to bring our balance sheet above that. But then the third part, which is I think the most difficult part, which is why we brought three different key principals on the deal, is they want to see liquidity. So they want to see post-close, after you've closed on the deal, that you're going to have enough liquid capital, preferably cash assets in a bank account, that are going to equal approximately 10% of that loan. So that would mean we needed to have, north of $800,000 sitting in the bank, just liquid. And a lot of people, are not going to keep, $800,000 sitting in the bank, right? Because that capital is not earning any interest. Most investors are going to be deploying that capital into something that's going to be earning them some sort of return. So that's why that hurdle is usually the hardest. So in order to get financing, you really need to have a good balance sheet, with both net worth and the liquidity. But you also need to have at least one person on your team, preferably, more, who have experience with that lender, especially if you're looking to get agency debt.
Yeah, thank you for walking us through that debt process. I know a lot of people out there might be asking themselves, well, you know what? How do I actually go bigger? And there's also a lot of people promoting that everyone should go as big as possible, as fast as possible, and sometimes it's just not possible. I mean, you need to have all this very well established relationships with people that know and trust you, for you to be able to, if you don't have the net worth and liquidity and experience, for you to be able to bring them as key principals and build that team to put in front of the lender, so that the lender says, okay, I'll let you, I'll lend the group this amount of money. And obviously they're going to be, just like you mentioned, it might be non-recourse debt, but they need to trust you, right? Like, the key principals need to know that who you are, and they need to trust you, and that your integrity and everything. So not everyone has that team put together, right? It's from the get-go. So it takes time. And I think it's very well worth to understand all these things on the debt side. But anyway.
Well, and also to add to that, part of getting those bigger deals, is having 99% of the time, those deals are going to be done with brokers, right? And you need to establish that credibility with the broker, because the broker's not going to present you and recommend you to the seller if he doesn't think you're going to be able to close. He wants to make sure you're going to come to the closing table, that they're not sitting around for 60 to 90 days waiting for you, and then you end up not being able to perform on the deal, and it's a waste of everybody's time. So having that experienced team behind you can help you. It's hard for someone just getting involved to go in and try to close a larger deal.
Yeah, it is completely at the other end of the spectrum from a wholesaling deal, right? On a single family, where you actually can go ahead and tell someone, hey, I'm going to buy your property. Give me 15 days due diligence period, or inspection period, as they call it on single family, and inspection period. And you have 15 days to really back out of the deal if you are not able to find a buyer, or actually if you're not going to be able to close, you can just back out. No penalties, no anything. Here, you not only suffer in terms of reputation in the eyes of the broker and everyone, but then you also you might have some hard cash from the moment that you sign the contract, and it's way more difficult, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
And there's a lot of expenses involved, like you were saying, on the due diligence side. You got to get those loan applications in. You're spending tens of thousands of dollars on that, retainers for attorneys, your due diligence team. I mean, there's a lot of capital. Even if you have no hard money day one in the contract, if maybe your money doesn't go hard till after due diligence, you still have a lot of soft costs coming out of your pocket that are gonna. It's a commitment. You're making a commitment.
Right.
So we talked about the financing, the debt side. Now let's talk a little bit more about the equity side. How do you go about it?
Well, the equity is, extremely important to getting these deals across the line. So it's about, I think, developing a strong database, investors, people who I could tell you from my experience what I did. I joined one of these groups I had mentioned before, where there was a mentor and a lot of people involved, and people invest in other people's deals. And I was able to raise a little bit of capital from that, but the vast majority of the capital that I raised and continue to raise every time I do a deal is from my own database, and that's people that I've known over the years. Being in New York for 25 years, having worked at a number of different agencies, meeting a lot of people. I'd like to think I had a very good reputation in the business world, and so people knew, Matt, he's a good businessman. He's a very good project manager, and he's a likable person. But they also knew, people would start to know, as you get to know people, you find out what their interests are. People knew that I was doing real estate. Like I said, I had been doing it for about 10 years on the side as a hobby, but it was something that I did in New York. So people knew that. And once I started getting involved in multifamily, people started to know that. And once in a while, I might post something on Facebook that, I got involved in this deal or that deal or whatever. And then I'd be talking with friends of mine, and they'd be like, "Oh, Matt, you're a real estate mogul now. Ha ha ha." And I would laugh, I would be the one saying, "Ha ha ha." And they would say, "No, really, like you're buying these large deals." And I said, "Yeah, well, the next time you have something, can you let me know about it?" And I would say, "Sure." And that's sort of how I organically, through my, people that I knew, friends and family and business colleagues, have been able to develop a database of people that I have relationships with, people that I know, that know me and hopefully like me and trust me as well. And whenever I have a real estate deal, I go ahead and I send it out to that group of people, and they'll let me know if they're interested. And there tends to be a lot of interest. I mean, in all the deals I've done, I've had more people interested than I've been able to allow into the investment. So, I mean, it's not like it overnight sells out, but eventually, before we close, inevitably there's people at the, towards the end who are like, "Hey, I'm interested." And I'm like, "Yeah, we're sorry, we just filled up." So it's been good. And for me right now, it's really about performing well. I mean, my deals have been doing really well. And so my investors are very happy about that, and they're coming back. And hopefully they tell a friend.
Yeah, word of mouth. That's definitely helpful. How did you overcame the hurdle of people having you in their mind see you as, okay, Matt, the advertising guy from New York and project manager and this and that, but not necessarily they don't really know that you're in real estate, or that you have any experience in real estate. And then there's always like, okay, you're coming to me with a real estate deal, but weren't you in advertising? Like, that's kind of weird, right? So how did you overcome that?
Totally, 100%. And so that's not something that happens overnight, right? So for me, like I said, my inner circle knew the real estate stuff that I was doing, more than, the really close friends and family, right? Really knew what I was doing. And by the time I syndicated my first deal, I had well over 1,000 units in my investment portfolio. I had invested, I think, in like 7 or 8 syndications that other people were doing, right? Initially as a passive investor, and then as a key principal in a deal. So, there was that aspect of it. And then there was also the aspect of my co-sponsor, who had many, many years of experience doing this. So that when I was, talking with people about my plans and what I was going to do, they kind of knew, and it's not something that happened overnight. Like, okay, I'm working at an agency on Monday, and then by Friday I'm, syndicating a $10 million deal. There was several years in between there where people knew that I was getting more and more involved in it. And I also, I started a newsletter that I still have. I send out a newsletter only once a quarter. I don't, hit people over the head every month with it or anything. But once a quarter, I send an email out and I let people know the kinds of things that I'm up to. And I'm up to quite a lot nowadays. I mean, I have a very successful meetup that I run here in Massachusetts. We usually get well over 100, sometimes over 200 people at those, and we do those meetings monthly, which are fantastic. And so I'll mention that in my newsletters. When I moved here to Boston, I started taking some classes at Boston University. I did a whole curriculum there and got some certificates in commercial real estate and commercial real estate finance. So I'll talk about that in my thing, or I'll go see some new big project that's being built downtown Boston and have a photo on there, So I put some of this stuff on Facebook too, but in my newsletter, which is a tighter inner circle, I let people know sort of what I'm up to. And I think through that, they're like, okay, well, this guy is actually doing it. It's legit. And now I have, several properties that I've syndicated under my belt. And, it takes baby steps. And for me, it was really about, leveraging that experience of someone who had done it before for my first couple of deals, because that was, I think, like I said before, I think people knew me as a businessman and people respected me from that perspective. So they knew I was good at business. They liked me as a person. They thought, I don't want to put words in people's mouth. I think people thought I, had integrity and things of that nature. But yeah, the real estate thing was like, okay, he's been doing it. He's starting to do more and more, but look at his partner who's done it 10 times. Like, he's got that guy too. So that, I think, gave people sort of, if they were on the fence, kind of put them over the fence.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And so we talked about that, the financing, the debt, the equity, putting that deal together, closing. Then as an operator, what are some of the biggest challenges you face when managing your own commercial real estate deals?
So that's the easy part for me. The operations is sort of my specialty. Having done that project management, having that background, I have a PMI certification. Like I kind of got some good skills. So what I was able to do was take a lot of those tools in my tool belt, if you will, and apply them to the asset management, and the operations on a day-to-day basis. And, people always ask me, hey, do you use any software? And I did. I've used software, especially in the project management world, working at digital agencies. We use things like Basecamp, which is fantastic, but those sort of software tools are only good if everybody's using them. And I found just sometimes in the agency world, but definitely in the real estate world, not everyone wants to or has access or has experience using those tools. I use a good old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet, and I've developed an Excel spreadsheet I have now that's 5 tabs worth of data. that I work on with my property management company. I call it the dashboard. So we have a weekly dashboard. We'll review the dashboard on our calls that we have. We have weekly calls. Some of the things in those tabs, we have, information on traffic in terms of, our traffic source, like where are leads coming in, people who are, sending in inquiries about units, then how many are we actually giving a tour to, and how many of those actually convert to leases. So we have details on that, what sources those are coming from. We have information on our leases, what what our previous lease was and what the new one is, and sort of information on renewals, all of that kind of thing. We have a KPIs tab, which has all my KPIs. KPI stands for key performance indicators. So in there, we'll have information on like move-ins and move-outs, and vacancies and renewals, and how many are vacant, but also how many are made ready? Because we might have 10 units that are vacant, but maybe they all just moved out yesterday. So maybe they're not ready for lease. So that's important for us to have. So all those different KPIs we have in there. And I also have just a projects tab. That one gets utilized a lot, mainly during the first year or so ownership, because all the things that I look to invest in have a value add component to them. So we can force appreciation and not just hope that the market's going to go up, but actually add value to the property. And so when we're doing those value adds, there's usually a lot of projects that we're doing, whether that's fixing up, the exteriors, maybe that's painting or landscaping or fixing a pool or things of that nature. But also we do interior unit upgrades as well. So all of those things are put together on this projects tab where we keep the status of every project, how that's moving along.
Cool, man. I mean, listen, I think we always say this, but because it's true, we can spend hours and hours talking about real estate here. We love this stuff, and we love hearing, your approach and your thought process, and obviously how you approach your, going from one industry to the other and the whole thing, right? So we could definitely spend hours, but we don't have that much time. So maybe we'll have you back in the near future to talk a little bit more. So just to basically start closing the show, a couple things. One is a question that I typically ask, which is, what's an advice, but I'm talking practical, like something that someone can go home or get on online and actually implement it. That might mean a tool that you're using, like a software that's been helpful on the asset management or on the capital raising. Whatever it is, something that's very practical. It could be a book that you've read in the last few months that you would, that you think it's awesome, that you want to recommend, or something along those lines.
Well, I'm in the middle of reading a book right now that I like a lot. It's called The E-Myth for Real Estate Investors.
I read. What is it for real estate investors specifically?
Yeah. So
okay.
As I understand it, his last name is Gerber. I just don't have the book in front of me. I think it's like Paul or Peter. Michael, I think it's Michael Gerber wrote the book. He wrote this book called The E-Myth, and it's a while ago. It's been very popular. And what they've done is they've taken this book now and broken it out for some different, it's a overall business book, but it's broken it out into different types of businesses and had experts in those business get involved. So this one, it's interesting. There'll be a chapter by Michael Gerber, which I think is very similar to the original book, although clearly has been modified to real estate a little bit. And then the next page is done by the guy, one of the house flipping guys. I think it's Sam Merrill, I think is his last name, from one of the flip your house flipping shows. Him and his partner, and they basically talk about the same subject as the chapter. And I guess they worked with Michael and they kind of translated into the real estate business. Anyway, it's very interesting way to approach businesses, especially when it comes to real estate. Because real estate, it's a lot of entrepreneurs. It's a lot of like solo, individuals, sole proprietorships. And what this book really does is teach you sort of how to structure your business so that it's not a sole proprietorship, which will then allow you to bring in employees and maybe eventually sell your business at some point in the future if you don't want to continue doing it. So it's about creating mechanisms and processes within your business that will allow you to scale. It's a very interesting. Anyone who's starting a business, it might give you an interesting way to think about structuring at the beginning while you're first setting things up. It's cool. It's a good book.
Cool. Thank you.
Matt, let's finish off this episode with sort of a fire round. I'm going to say a few words, and you have to tell me the first word or short phrase that comes to mind, okay? Are you ready?
Yeah, I feel like I'm in a psychiatrist's office. Okay, shoot.
Good, okay. First one, money.
Green.
Freedom.
America.
Cash flow.
Robert Kiyosaki.
Real estate.
Monopoly.
Crisis.
COVID.
Success.
Freedom.
Excellent. That's it. Matt, thank you very much for being with us today and sharing your story, the knowledge with our audience. Muchas gracias a todos los que nos están escuchando por acompañarnos. Igualmente, asegúrense de compartirlo, de darle like, comentar y seguirnos en todas nuestras redes sociales. Se Habla Real Estate y Se Habla RE en Twitter. Nuestra página web sehablarealestate.com. Para cualquier información, pues nos pueden escribir a nuestro correo electrónico info@sehablarealestate.com. Matt, if someone wants to learn more about what you're doing or get in touch with you, how can they do it?
Yeah, the best way to reach me would be through my website. It's mjppg.com. There's a contact page there. Also, you could just email me directly. It's Matt, M-A-T-T, at mjppg.com. I love talking and helping people regardless of, where you are in your real estate, experience. So muchas gracias. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for being here, Matt.